Someone was clocking us. That's unique, brother. Let his ass out because of that dirty cop. You giving him ill vibes. Let's get the fuck out of here.
In the street and drug game, you have to be constantly moving, adapting, and growing, because that's the only way you're gonna survive. The reason why Go survived for as long as he did was because he continued to adapt, not just in the street game, but in the real world of business with the elite. He was swimming in the ocean with big players like Simon Stern. Had he continued working under Kanan and Breeze in the streets, he would have been a small fish confined in that small bowl the older Kanan's narration spoke of. Him and Tommy then wouldn't have found themselves making it in the big city, just like Go said. They would have still been working the corners for Kanan and Breeze, but he placed himself in the bigger bowl where he could grow, albeit he did it by sending Kanan to prison, which does also make you ask the question, who's the real villain or power? But that's where we are with Kanan's journey at this moment in time. He's a fish that's looking to grow, move, and stay afloat from those hunting him. So the central theme of today's breakdown will be growth, and the constant threat of being a mark, the strategies, mindset, and dangers that lurk in a world where standing still can be the difference between life and death. We're also going to take a look at what I believe is some very clues left by the writers, which I personally don't think is an accident. So we're going to run through some clues and Easter eggs for a young Tommy, the constant mention of Sacristano, and D-Wiz in Raising Kanan Season 3. Now, episode 3 kicks off with Ronnie giving us a small glimpse of what he is capable of. And I say small glimpse because we're just getting started with his character. As we all saw later, there is a lot more to unpack. But towards the end of episode 2, we saw Ronnie and Unique entering a club, and this was the bouncer who at first refused to let Ronnie in because they had a dress code. Ronnie spent a long time ironing his clothes and getting ready for the night, only for the bouncer to talk shit about his appearance. We then saw him zoned in. He didn't want to be around no girls, he wasn't drinking or having a good time. He was locked in, focused on the bouncer, and I think we all knew what his next move was going to be. This was ruthless and cold, and I'd probably say we can expect more of this. Ronnie definitely won't forget those who disrespect him or talk out of line, which is maybe where Kanan got it from. Classic example, Brock. But we're going to get to more of Ronnie later on in this breakdown. Now, there was always going to be an immediate reaction to Sal Baselli's death. Detective Tanner had intel from a reliable source that there was an assassination attempt on Sal, which does make you ask the question, could one of the Italians be talking to the feds? They said they were here because he was selling some illegal fish, which I think we all knew was bullshit. The detectives wasted no time in telling Stefano they know that everything that's been happening around Queens can somehow be traced back to him. So this was a warning. Law enforcement were hot on his heels just like they were for everybody else. Now, as Stefano was being taken away by the feds, we had Kanan's narration giving us a perspective on navigating the complexities of the streets. They had to adopt a mindset of expansion, be constantly growing and moving. He spoke about the small bowl versus the big bowl because the size of the bowl symbolizes the environment that someone finds themselves in. For example, if you're in a small bowl, it limits your growth because there's only so much you can grow, whereas if you're in a big one, you definitely have a lot more room. Hence why Ghost was swimming with the sharks and aspired to the wealth and power of someone like Stern. But bringing it back to 1992, in essence, where Kanan finds himself at this moment in time in Queens, the world is his oyster. So the idea is to seize the opportunity to expand, claim that territory, influence, and power. However, success in the street game isn't just about territory, it's also about strategic thinking and elevating the mind. So was Kanan going to be a small fish or a big fish? Was he content like famous, or was he ready to drive and assert his dominance? In a world that they live in, understanding your position and ambition is definitely crucial, because they're in a game where it's survival of the fittest, and progression is crucial for survival. So moving to the bigger bowl is about recognizing the limits of your current circumstances and looking to progress. Now, having said that, Kanan approached Simrad again to change his mind about supplying him with weed. He told him that he's got a door-to-door operation that will help him move a hell of a lot more, but Simrad's response was he doesn't need it, because people come to his door, which we all know selling out your own crib is a cardinal sin. It's partly why Marvin got locked up and why he did his bid in Elmira. For Simrad, what Kanan was offering was a win-win. Giving product to Kanan reduces his risk, and it also makes him more bank. However, he did warn Kanan again. He didn't want Famous anywhere near this, because he's always high, and so Fame is one to keep an eye on. Let's see if Kanan's new hustle changes him for the good or for the worse. Now, we know the federal task force just opened up at Howard's precinct, looking into all the New York crime families, and just because Rock was out the game, it didn't mean she was off the hook. Howard also told Rock about how she saw Kanan in the streets with some new friends, and Kanan being in the streets setting up his own hustle at this moment in time was bad news. All it takes is for one of Kanan's career boys to be picked up. They snitch, it then gets back to Kanan, and then it opens up a whole can of worms for Howard and Rock, and there's only so much Howard can cover up. So we saw Rock heading straight over to Famous's crib. She questioned Famous around who Kanan's been kicking it with, and she clocked the maps on the table, which also goes back to Kanan's narration. Kanan was claiming his territory, but Rock isn't stupid. She knows what Kanan's been up to, which is why she gave Famous some more cash to try and keep them off the streets. Now, as Rock left Famous's apartment, despite her being out the game, lurking in the shadows were the feds, which also goes back to one of the central themes of this breakdown: everybody's a mark in this game. It's also a constant reminder she will have to be constantly looking over her shoulder, because it doesn't seem like law enforcement are playing games this season. Raising Kanan is also the most real power and very true to the 90s, so when we talk about how law enforcement never seem to catch wins in the Power universe, I really don't think that case applies to Raising Kanan. We've already seen a few getting arrested, tossed into holding cells, and one or two more in an orange jumpsuit, and no doubt, the deeper we get into the series, I really do think some of these characters will end up in jail. Now, over at the precinct, Howard watched on as the task force were doing their thing, and I think at some stage Howard will probably have to get in between. Maybe tamper with evidence, have a look at what they've got on the crime families in New York, and so on. But I mentioned how we needed to keep our eyes and ears open when it came to Ralph Sacristano, and so this is now the third mention where the captain said he was buried in his shit. So again, let's not forget he's a detective who was found guilty of manufacturing evidence against at least 13 people so far, which I do think is based on the real life story of Louis Scarcella, so I do think is worth another mention once again. And whether they're kind of just building up to one major release, who knows, let's wait and see. Now, the captain also mentioned that Berg's case isn't closed either, because Adina Foyle is keeping the case well and truly alive and on IAD's radar, so Howard knew he had to kind of intervene, and later we saw him actually approaching Foyle.
If something happens to me, it's not going to be what it looks like. Howard set me up.
Foyle said that Shannon told her if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be what it looked like, and Foyle definitely knew something doesn't quite add up. She knows Beck would never have committed suicide, but whether or not Howard's words were enough to stop her in her tracks, let's wait and see, because if not, I do think Howard may have to get his gloves back on, which he definitely doesn't want to do. He's facing a lot of inner conflict at this moment in time. He turned to his faith after he was shot, and he mentioned how he wanted to do things a little different, but it has been a while since he's been to mosque, which definitely stems from the conflict from within, especially about his actions and sins that he's had to commit. With Ronnie and Unique, we catch up with the brothers in the gym, and Ronnie reminded Unique of how he was late. It didn't matter if he was dealing with things for Jerome. It always seems like his business when it comes to Ronnie. He's always tidying up and likes things how they're supposed to be, very old school. Now Unique is just getting back up on his feet. We know how he approached Stefano in episode 2, but he still needed approval from the rest of his partners. Before Ronnie, every minute that they weren't pushing, he felt like they were losing out to Rock, and normally he would have been right, except Rock isn't in the game. However, you do get the sense that Ronnie was kind of feeling his brother out around his intentions when it came to Rock. He knows he was bullshitting when he said he cut his hand on his car door, and he could smell something wasn't quite right. That's why he said he should have taken her out back in the day, but it's never too late for that, and Unique silence I think said it all. Ronnie is definitely smart, he's strategic, and he definitely is a chess player. It's also another reason why I don't believe he's Breeze like many believe, because Breeze was said to be strong but not smart. Now, in regards to getting back to business, Unique had to speak to Stefano's partner to get the green light. So as Unique walked through an illegal gambling operation, we got our first glimpse at Kwan, and he gave the lowdown to Unique about how their system operated. Their people in South Asia put the heroin on boats, it gets unloaded in Canada, then the Italians truck it down to New York, and from there, it gets dispersed to local distributors. Now, he was happy to bring Unique on board, but he would have to use his cousin's Chinese restaurant as a distribution hub, which initially didn't go down well with Unique, but something that he did reluctantly have to accept. Now, having said that, I do wonder what Ronnie will make of this business deal, because I highly doubt he would be happy to sit back while Unique's making the moves. Ronnie also doesn't strike me as a person who you can tell what to do or how to run his operation, and so this little setup that they have will definitely start to get a little complex. Now, speaking of Ronnie's chess moves, whenever he is introduced, you do get the sense that he's up to something. Most of the time when he's on screen, there's this eerie music in the background, which adds even more tension and mystery, because there's still so much more to learn about who he is and what he's capable of. Now, we did see the ruthless side to his character at the beginning of this episode, but there was also this strategic side. He knew exactly what he was doing when he told Panessa maybe Unique's got a side piece, because he had an inkling he did. So, with Unique and Rock, we saw Unique going over to Rock's crib, and you could definitely tell Rock was still paranoid. She still can't stop looking over her shoulder, despite her being out the game at this moment in time, which also goes back to Unique's point.
Rock's done. You believe her? I think the question is whether she believes herself.
Now, she tells Unique that she's got plans to make bigger moves, and her money was just collecting dust in a storage unit at this moment in time, which I think is information which she really shouldn't be giving to Unique. Yeah, they may be sleeping together for now, and like Kwan said earlier in the episode, you can't always help out who you fall in love with. But it may not always be that way, because when Ronnie confronts Unique about Rock, because he definitely will, his loyalty will be tested. Now Rock also warned Unique that if he's messing with the Italians, he better be careful because she doesn't want any drama around her. But little does she know, Unique's keeping another huge secret, which of course is Ronnie Mathis. He was down the street keeping an eye on Unique, and this goes back to how I mentioned this is a character who is very calm, patient, and strategic. He talks less and observes more, because he's someone who's thinking about his next chess move. But sooner or later his patience is also going to wear thin with Unique, and that's where I feel his loyalty towards Rock and Ronnie will be tested. So where will his loyalties lie? Now with Jukebox and Lou, we saw them coming together rehearsing for Juke's audition, and just look how happy alive and these two characters are when they're in their element with music. They're both happy doing what they love, and Marvin agrees. The problem is when it comes to both their dreams in the music industry, we all know it's only a matter of time before it comes crashing down, it's just how and why. With Juke and Rock, their relationship also runs deep. Let's not forget there was a period where Juke actually lived with Rock. They used to have their girly talks and shared secrets, which is also another side plot to bear in mind. Juke told Kanan that she knows secrets about their family way back in season 1, but Rock also has a lot of love for Juke and vice versa. Now when it comes to Juke, we always have to bear in mind what character we saw in Power, what made her turn so cold and ruthless. We know her dream is to become a singer, but we also know that won't work out for her at some point. Whether it's because of Lou letting her down again, let's wait and see. So let's talk about what went down with Lou as well as Marvin. We had Marvin and Lou enter a club with Marvin handing some product to some Wall Street guys he made a connection with in episode 2. And just on a quick side note, I really do hope Marvin has done his homework. There were undercover cops trying to catch him with Tony in season 1, and I really wouldn't be surprised if there were more circling around with the Thomases. But he received a 911 pager from someone mysterious, so he left Lou at the club and told him not to do anything stupid. But what did Lou go and do? He went and did something completely stupid, and in doing so, he let Juke down, which is something we will come back around to. But on Marvin, he went to go save Gerald Moore, which is someone who Marvin met during his anger management classes in season 2. He had a bit of a run-in with him, but eventually they came around. But this scene really shows Marvin's growth as a person, and the writers really have done a great job in humanizing Marvin's character. They could have easily made his character remain reckless, but as I mentioned in one of my breakdowns prior, there has been a bit of a role reversal with Lou. Now with Lou, just before he got into a fight, he walked into a bar, sat down, and took us down memory lane.
Kanan, Elijah Stark, get your ass down here.
In season 1, Rock shouted Kanan Elijah Stark, and I know it is a small detail, but I did think it was worth a mention. His grandfather's name is Elijah. Now Lou said the record that was playing in the background was his father, Elijah Thomas, also known as E-Train, who is a very well respected musician. Despite New York being a big place, even then sometimes it really is a small world. Shirley Bolmar, who owned this bar, actually knew Lou's father, and here's where we learn some more history. Lou said apparently Elijah Thomas gave up on living, like he did with music, boxing, and everything else, which is where I feel Lou's character story could end up, especially after he let Jukebox down yet again. He got into a fight at this bar which ended up with him being tossed into a holding cell. Now while Lou was in this holding cell, he woke up and saw D-Wiz and Scrappy in front of him, which is a constant reminder of two characters who didn't deserve to die, and how he's still living with that guilt and remorse. We saw him open up to Kanan and Marvin about both D-Wiz and Scrappy, which tells you he's definitely not over their deaths, and I don't think he'll ever will be. Now on a side note, how I mentioned the captain keeps bringing up Sacristano, well this is the second time they've now mentioned D-Wiz and Scrappy, so could it be a foreshadow for maybe what's to come? Maybe D-Wiz's brother's introduction, who I still believe is the best bet for Breeze. Maybe he's the one holding the gun to Lou, which is a scene from the season trailer, so that's just a thought. Now as Lou was tossed into a holding cell, Juke had to go into this audition without her beat and without Uncle Lou. We also saw her go into the toilet and throw up, which is another callback to season 1. Sometimes she does get a little nervous, which is also a constant reminder the writers are taking a very patient approach building a character up to the Juke that we did see on Power. This is also where we met the other two girls that will make up the girl group, Crystal and Aisha. But when it comes to Lou, one thing's for sure, both she and Marvin are definitely not going to be happy. She forgave him when it came to giving her song to Ziza, but I think Juke's patience might be wearing thin when it comes to those letting her down. So when we talk about the role reversal with Marvin, it's also worth noting that Marvin's the one who's now in her corner, with Lou being the letdown. Now when Lou was released, he came back to Shirley's bar to apologize for his behavior, and even though I mentioned I see his story ending very similar to his father's, where he just gives up on everything around him, it does seem like he's found something that might just give him a bit of hope. Shirley said she wouldn't mind having some help around her bar, and with Lou's keen eye for music, the door was open for him to come in and give this place a spark. Now, coming back full circle to the beginning of this video, we all know we're watching Kanan's journey and his rise to power, and potentially even his downfall, depending on how far the writers do want to take Raising Kanan. But with that being said, nothing was going to stop him from elevating his game, and he certainly wasn't accepting any more money from Rock. He made that crystal clear to Famous. Their next move was Simrad and the courier service. We see Kanan getting his hustle up and running using Paul's courier service, but the product that he's sourcing from Simrad, and all of them are about to benefit from Kanan's street smarts. Business is already booming. Pages and phone calls are coming in thick and fast, and already they need more couriers on board. So just like the older Kanan said, does he want to be a small fish or a big fish? Well, now he's in a place where he can definitely grow, and he certainly has the ambition to match. Meanwhile with Rock, we are the polar opposite with Rock getting her hair done, because what else has she got to do now that she's out the game? And I do have to say, she looks bored as hell, but she overhears the hairdressers talking about how their landlord is trying to sell, because he's separating from his wife, and Rock senses an opportunity. But as always, everyone's a mark in this game, and the feds are keeping a very close eye on every single one of her moves. Now, just on a quick side note, circling back to the beginning where I spoke about Easter eggs and clues, I do think the writers do know what they're doing by leaving Tommy's name visible in the background. They know his power fans don't miss a beat, and this was definitely left here on purpose. Whether they're teasing an introduction, who knows, but we do have to be realistic in regards to the timeline. We're in 1992, and Kanan will no doubt meet Breeze before he meets a young Tommy and Ghost, but just something to keep an eye on. Now in this game, you have to keep on moving, because if you don't, you're a mark. Somebody is always watching, they're always on the hunt, and if you stand in one place, you're easy to find. And this is something I feel Kanan will learn the hard way. Ronnie's just standing there staring at Kanan, and I'm sure he knows that this is Rock's son. And so as Howard once said in season 1, to get to the queen, sometimes you have to go through the prince.